Good evening. This is the art exhibit and meet the artist for Devi Anne Moore. This is the Virginia Beach Public Library. My name is Sandy Hopkins, Adult Services Librarian for the Virginia Beach Public Library, and tonight I have with me Robert Kennedy. He is the Volunteer Art Gallery Coordinator for the Central Library. Rob, would you like to introduce the artist, please?
Thanks very much, Sandy, and welcome to all. We appreciate you joining us, and we are very pleased to have Devi Anne Moore with us this evening. Devi is an acclaimed professional artist and teacher with over 35 years of experience teaching in art centers, colleges, and her studio. Devi instructs studio art for children and adults. She earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Tyler School of Art at Temple University and a Master of Fine Arts from Old Dominion University and Norfolk State University and a Master of Arts from Regent University. Devi's award-winning artwork of many series has been exhibited widely in the national art community in museums, galleries, universities, art centers, and co-ops, as well as in regional and local art venues. After completion of 49 3D bas-relief paintings for her 7-7 series, based on the Book of Revelation, Devi started studying contemporary classical realism at ateliers. She found that Studio Incamminati in Philadelphia and Studio Escalier in France resonated with her artistic goals. Though the two have different philosophies, Studio Incamminati is to turn the light on, and Studio Escalier is to paint the light. She continues to integrate these ideas while painting people from life, as well as still lifes, one of which she calls her personal vanitas. Thus, Devi is dedicated to maintain and grow in those disciplines to become a better artist. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Devi. We are pleased to have you with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate you and Sandy letting me show my artwork again at the Virginia Beach Library. And I'll be showing you a little bit about where I've been and where I am going now as an artist. After completion of my 49 constructed paintings I call 7-7s, they're all derived from the Book of Revelation, I decided to go back to my first love of painting the figure. In high school, my parents allowed me to begin drawing the figure at age 16 at UVA. So going to art school, I had hoped to learn from the old masters. My favorites back then were George de la Tour, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, to name a few. But when I attended art school in the 1970s, the painting department said painting was dead. So I became a modern artist, being influenced by Elizabeth Murray, who became my hero with her cutout art, as well as Frank Stella, whom my art teacher from New York City claimed to have discovered. Robert Rauschenberg influenced me, and I discovered the Beatus manuscripts from Spain, which were depictions of the Book of Revelation for the first millennium. The Whitney Museum gave my art school, Tyler School of Art, 2 years of direct interaction with live artists to discuss their art rather than giving us students any real academic training. Fortunately, in contrast to academic training, I had incredible art history professors such as Erwin Panofsky's wife on Northern Renaissance art, Martin Eidelberg, Betty Lipsmeyer, Linda McGreevy, and even a great history of photography, which helped me to tie the use of camera with modern art. My favorite artists have always been John Singer Sargent, Vermeer, Sorolla, Zorn, Betjen, and Mancini. But I also have admired the simplicity of artists like Edward Hopper, Alex Katz, Fairfield Porter, and Milton Avery, based on less is more. As a matter of fact, that was a joke in art school with my last name being Moore, less is more. I always tend to complicate things. This is just where I had hoped my art was going to end up in a permanent location of the Book of Revelation, but unfortunately I was called to take it down. And so now I have a very crowded personal studio with bubble wrap all over my big, huge constructs. Many of them are 8 feet tall. But I began a new beginning when I discovered Nelson Shank's Studio Incamminati. So I decided to spend 10,000 hours of mastering contemporary classical oil painting in 2012. One day an email arrived with Nelson Shank's Studio Incamminati. It's in Philadelphia, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to go there full time and learn from the masters? Incamminati means moving forward. I was lucky to find videos and understand his philosophy for the school, as well as meet all the wonderful master artists there. One day when I was at the workshop, Nelson Shanks came into the studio and we all stopped what we were doing to watch the maestro go at transforming one of the students' artwork. Paraphrasing him from a YouTube that he made called An Artist's Journey, he says that the use of the gesture as capturing the human condition is far more important than a rigorous drawing. Truth by observation is what an artist does to convey life and reveal what is important. The great artists inspire and teach us. Developing a high perception and discipline in beauty is for the sake of awakening it in others. At the end of an era, I made a self-portrait I call End of the Era, with a dead chicken to end what I used to do with modern art and to start something new. I'm always inspired when I get to paint people from life. But without a model, I also make assignments for myself, such as selfies or do still lives. Studio Incamminati method is to turn the light on. The direct process of drawing with the brush abstractly helps you to build your painting, and I found it very exciting. Here's an example of what they taught with the turning of the Terminator, but more importantly, drawing all curves with straight lines. Also unique to Studio Incamminati is Nelson's palette of 22 color. He said to capture the truth of what you see realistically is necessary with color and not tonally. His color resonated with me, and that's what I thought I'd always had longed for. Here's an example of how we start our paintings with straight lines. They teach comparative anatomy with direct painting, that is, by drawing a gesture with brown paint on the brush directly on a medium gray valued imprimatur. The starts are the key to capture a live model in straight line gestures, working from large to small loosely but accurately, understanding the space the model is in, as well as the figure's proportions. By first determining the top and bottom, then stay flexible as you search to get proportional width marks in that ratio. You keep it abstract, understanding the pose as abstract shapes of light relational to abstract shapes of shadows. You never adjust the top and bottom marks, you're only adjusting the width as the model shifts and breathes, looking for cross-through lines, checking diagonals and other lines around the figure's immediate setting. This is an example of the open and closed grisaille that they teach. The first, you see the open grisaille that is formulating the shadow shapes. You spend as long as you need to on this part of the drawing till you get the likeness and you feel confident that you're ready to put in the next pass of color, which is a generic value study of 5 lights and 2 to 3 darks divided by the terminator, and that's the line that separates the light and the dark. These practices are to be repeated 1,000 times to get accurate. They coined this term as a duotone at Studio Incamminati. This is an example of a 4-stage process. The first stage, first of all, the model sits for about 20 minutes at a time, And so the first part of the drawing, you can take as long, as many increments of 20 minutes as you want to get the drawing right. But the second pass is starting to calibrate the color relationships and value, hue, chroma to each other. We're not matching color, but finding the perceptual color. This is based on Henry Henchy's influence for perceptual color, which Nelson Shanks teaches at his school. The Studio Incamminati method is fluid and creates an alive painting of the human condition and emotive content for both the artist as he engages with the subject, and therefore later for the viewer. Therefore, art that is an experience of the human condition with a live model is energized more than with a photograph. Attention to detail is thus individual to each artist's style, from either hyper-realism to a very painterly one. This is a study of a planar head with color versus another academy may have done it tonally. This is just an example of one of my paintings showing the drawing and then moving on to the finish. Here's one that probably had the model for 5 days, and so there was more time for painting, and so I was able to develop more of the luminosity in the colors. I show you this example because it's a head from one of my figure studies, in which when you have such a strong light and strong shadows in the model standing, the shadow is always moving. So with the shadows moving, you have to decide at some point where you're going to keep the shadow. And so you're always adjusting and correcting and build to understand more and more as you're using the brush as your drawing tool. Then one thing that you do is you may have to paint, which I did on this one, 4 times that face. I'll be showing you more portraits later. So Nelson Shanks was big on still lifes. I hear so often from people that they don't like still lifes, but his quote struck me, and I find it very true. Still life is the key that unlocks the secrets to great painting. When painted with extraordinary perception and ability, objects have the potential to allegorically represent the full range of the human condition. So here's an example of an assignment. Since I'm a teacher, I guess I give myself assignments, but this is painting all white objects under a warm classical light with the 22 color palette of Studio Incamminati. Another assignment is to do a single object to develop your composition and blurring edges and learning texture. I did that with the cantaloupe also. I do more. I'm just giving you examples. Assignments in red. The top one is really dear to my heart because I was able to go to Paris in 2019. And after 3 weeks of study in Paris, Michelle Tully, who is the art teacher, little daughter, gave me 2 origami pieces of paper in red and told me I did a great job. So I'm sort of like the wooden mannequin doing a flip. Enjoy. And then sometimes your studio just catches your eye just the way you have it set up at the time, and I'll stop and do a painting. And this is called Snow Day Muse because everything was cool around with the light coming off of snow coming up into my window. Also, I've been influenced. There's an artist, Dwayne Kaiser, who challenges artists to do daily paintings, and he calls them au premier coup, which is the same thing as a daily alla prima, wet on wet painting. So anytime from 30 minutes to 5 hours, you can just sit and you can set up a still life. You can just paint outside, anything that catches your eye. You use a large brush and a lot of paint, and you just paint without trying to do your normal methods. So I painted on all different types of sizes and types of textures. It's aluminum board on top, and sometimes just try to paint and approach it a new way with each little painting. They're really fun because there's no expectation, and you can move the paint around, you can scrape it off, you can wipe it off and start again. They're just quick little notations that you wouldn't normally paint in that way. So I thought I was going to do these as warm-ups, but it just takes up too much paint. So I've also been working on a series that I call Vanitas, There's an Elephant in the Room series. These are sort of symbolic depictions of human vanity towards directed to my personal family and life. The Vanitas are my personal narrative things about life through inanimate objects that carry a hidden story. I hope, though, that they're hinting at something all of us can reflect or ask questions, because life, there's no real answers. The word vanita means vanity and corresponds to the meaninglessness of earthly life and the transient nature of all good earthly goods and pursuits, as from the book of Ecclesiastes. This first one are articles chosen from the repertoire of Nepalese things that I grew up with in my home, all over the house: coffee tables, mantles, bookcases. These were collected by my parents, who lived with my older two sisters in Nepal before tourism in the early 1950s. And they had actually had tales that they could talk about. And I was the third child. I was sort of the odd child. So as one of three daughters and being the youngest, I just have these three thrones, and they're actually incense holders from Nepal. And my mother actually wore that and had that leopard shawl made when she was there. It was before it wasn't popular to wear fur. And these are just things, and it's sort of about two against one when there's three children growing up. And same thing with this. My mother collected tea, those beautiful tea cups. The one on the left, kind of a little bit different, cut off. And we always were supposed to act perfect in my home growing up, and it was always the throw of the dice to me. And so we had all these Buddhas and things around our house, kind of keeping us in line. I found that all these distinctive household items symbolically both bound my family together but separated us too. I was named Devi, meaning the goddess of creation, destruction, so I call this a self-portrait. And it was just interesting later on in life, when I felt called to paint the book of Revelation, that my name meant that. True identity for me wasn't really revealed till after the passing of my parents. So all these vanitas sort of helped me deal with some things growing up, and also family dynamics in general, hearing about other people's families. But also was interesting to be around Eastern culture and Western thought growing up. So I call them elephant looking in a mirror. Dead roses suggest frailty and transition from life to death. So this is a reflection of my parents. I like to work on diptychs or triptychs a lot. So it just helps me to organize my thoughts and put down my story. Love potion number 9. It's sort of about first love triangles growing up. I really like Jacques-Louis David, so I just have his postcard hanging in my studio, and decided to do a painting that I say is about champion versus tragedy. People will call me up and tell me there's an estate sale of an artist, and I'll go and I was able to get this bust of a child, which I had always wanted to own. And when I was in my early 50s, I found out I was Italian, and somebody gave me this Italian scale. So this is really about me finding out with my Italian roots, and it has a feather kind of shifting the balance. And this is just one that I did. Somebody brought me this really incredible calendar from the 60s, and it had a reproduction of Rembrandt's The Mill painting. So I just set up a still life with colored gels and used a Dresden lace statue I'd gotten at the thrift shop to kind of depict Gone with the Wind. And then this is the bust in Northlight. Just, I call it the King Child. I like to do art that has puns and sometimes eclectic references. So this is kind of using John Singer Sargent's Madame X hand next to a doll she might have had growing up. The horseshoe crab symbolizes growth and fertility and protection from evil. And it was just kind of a pun, I guess. I've been doing drawings also of my parents' adventures in Nepal. So the first one on the left, my mother, when she accepted to go in the early 50s, it was when the Maharaja was there. It was before communism. And she decided to take a ball gown with her. And so I did a picture of her dressed up in her ball gown with the Himalayas behind her. And my father did research on smallpox, malaria, and other diseases while he was there. So that's him researching. The terrain there was incredible, what they had to go through. They were often guided by Sherpas and Gurkhas, and they did a lot of footwork. And there was airplanes, but they had no runways, and then they traveled on donkeys and elephants. And the bottom right-hand side is my father doing an eye operation, and they had to move the patient outside for better light. And just some more of the traveling with backpacks, and my mother's climbing on an elephant to ride somewhere. And the story was my sister, who was born there, would have to sleep on top of an elephant to keep the monkeys and snakes from her. And then my father trained indigenous people, and there's just a nurse that he was training when he was there. So finally I get to my portraits and figures, and my first influence, as I said, was from Studio Incamminati. They usually used artificial light sources, and we never painted from photographs, so I determined that I wouldn't do that either for 7 years. The Turn the Light On motto from Nelson Shanks is what they always said we were trying to do with this 22 color palette. And then the second influence I'll show you would be from Studio Escalier, where they said they paint the light as a subject. So I enjoy capturing the expression of my subjects in oil as they breathe and move in front of me. And I try to capture their likeness, what I think it is, inside and out. I try to find their personality and capture what they express to me. Sometimes I make it up, and sometimes they reveal it during the breaks or while you're with them. Someone said to keep the emotive factor first, then keep in mind that throughout the entire process. Every person has a story, so that's what I tried to paint. There's nothing more sublime than painting a live model and understanding how the light and color introduces the subjects and moments of you getting to know them as you engage with them to get a likeness, and that is created deeper than your initial meeting of them. This painting I did was my first portrait. My father, after art school, had asked me to paint him several times, and he always hated what I painted of him. So I really gave up on portraiture until I saw up in Studio Incamminati 5 different artists who were master artists not care about the likeness so much, but just painted what they saw at the moment and enjoyed it so much that gave me the courage. So this is one of the first ones that I did. And then, as I said, I would have loved to have gone to school there, but I didn't. So we, a couple artists and I get together and pay for a model. And it's so interesting, the different people who are willing to sit for you. It's not easy sitting, but this is a dancer. And I painted that with 4 colors. I didn't paint it with the 22 colors. This is an actress from Richmond. So it's just very interesting, the people that will be willing that you get to pose. This person unfortunately passed away this year, Joe Philliposki. You may have heard of him, but he made his outfit in order to recite at the Mariners Museum Mariners prose and poetry, and he sat there with one of his books and reading to us while he was posing. Sometimes you can't tell how old or young a model is, and it's kind of strange, and you try to capture that too. She's a model that modeled many different paintings that I've done, and she was just so quiet and serene, a lovely person. This is a filmmaker, and he was willing to even wear the French beret, the artist's beret, but he always looked like he was ready to smile, or he was always smiling. This is an actor, and he's small in stature, but he just always held his body so erect. I just had to put a paintbrush in him. He just seems distinguished to me. And sometimes we get other artists to sit for us, and we just try to make it more natural looking, the environment. And then other times we just want to keep it simple and just create a very ambiguous background. And then mostly I won't do this, but sometimes I'll go back and change it. I put a kimono on her and had her holding a letter. I just felt like that's what the painting needed. Caroline has her orange hair, red hair, and she models, and every time she has a different look. And I enjoy painting her. She's a challenge, but I enjoy it. This one was from Trinidad, and she just was so vivacious and seemed could barely sit still, but it was just really fun painting her. So this is called Unmasked. This is way before COVID, but I've just decided that she was Superwoman who took her mask off. Occasionally you can do a quick study of the same figure and then go back and do a longer pose. So I'm just showing you the differences. I like a lot of times what I'll do very quickly, but I enjoy the longer pose. This model was just so amazingly pale, and that green fabric just reflected onto her skin. It was just astonishing. It was just kind of fun, different to paint. This model fell asleep, and I thought of Edward Hopper, so I just call it Train Ride. Just reminded me of his work. And Jason just came in with all the tools. It was just really fun to paint what he set himself up with, and with his tattoos. That was a real fun experience. And this is the first one I did on a white canvas. Usually Studio Incamminati says to keep it gray or a medium value, but this created more of a luminosity painting on a white canvas. And this woman was really interesting how she painted, how she wore the hat to the dress. They didn't match, but she put them together. And this is Caroline again with the, she loves vintage clothing, so you never know what she might bring to wear when you ask her to model. And if I can't hire a model, I'll paint self-portraits. The one on the left is one with several mirrors, and it's a longer pose. And I had repeated dreams when I was younger of 7-headed dragons, so I just put that in the mirror. And the one on the upper right side, it was before I cleaned up my studio one day, and it was such a mess, but I looked in the mirror, I liked it. I just did a quick little painting. And the bottom one is one I started in North Light, but the clouds just came in. It got so dark, I turned on a warm light. And these are just example of heads from my figures that I just like to still capture their likeness and their mood. So as I said, I had the opportunity to go to Paris my first time last in April of 2019 and study with Michelle Tully. They only paint in North Light. In fact, their studio is Toulouse-Lautrec's old studio in Paris. Their whole purpose is to calibrate hue, chroma value of figure ground simultaneously in order to paint the truth of that moment. So they call it painting the subject of light. And I realized this is what I needed after the many years of learning Nelson Shank's approach of turning the light on and dividing the light from shadow. And that's how he developed his 4-year program of contemporary classical realism. But not all ateliers are the same, and I just really appreciate that Incamminati and Studio Escalier both have a very prismatic palette. Michelle Tully and Timothy Stotts had been mentored by Ted Jacobs and Jacob Collins, and they carry their system of thought and teach both in Paris and the countryside of France. And it was just amazingly different than what I was doing with Studio Incamminati. Their palette is of 9 to 15 prismatic colors, but for them, they will make tints of these strong colors to use in their painting. And they paint rivers or strings of color that go from dark to light for each component, such as the hair, the skin, the background, and the clothing. What they teach about painting is also the truth of a moment and what they see from life, just like Studio Incamminati claims. It's easy to say, but not easy to do. And they talk very highly about how Vermeer was able to achieve this. And they try to explain that as they teach you how to paint the light as a whole, calculating all areas as relational contrast as the darks turn into the light. They work small and often on a white canvas or a transparent raw umber imprimatura. They also describe the planes, and so the process of dividing the head into planes helps them so they can turn the head and understanding the relative contrast and the intensity of contrast in the different places as it turns in light or turns in space. They work from dark to light while calibrating the figure ground and clothing simultaneously as they see the planes within the anatomical structures. And they deliberately paint each plane with slightly different mixtures in order to turn the head out of darkness towards the light. They'll forfeit the features to teach this to make this egghead believable in the light it is in. They use North Light, and it's always changing and fleeting. And with a live model, the artist creates the plane patch to make the best solution for that moment. Thus, in every moment, trying to convey the truth of what they see until they put down and adjust until the logical whole of light across the painting is depicted. They had international models who will not let you photograph them, but they didn't mind showing their art of the paintings. We did 17 paintings in 3 weeks while I attended all the art museums and places. It was such an incredible experience. I was there when Notre Dame caught fire also, which was a remarkable time to be there. So I decided to recently take a Zoom class with them. And it was interesting because I still didn't want to paint from photographs. And so they said that they use videos. So we painted from live videos, and they were able to experiment with different light effects. So Studio Incamminati always enjoys exploring the various light conditions to create an emotional impact of different light. All these studies were crucial for a complete sense of light as Vermeer captured. So this is a candlelight. And this is multiple lights in a little French shop. You could actually see the cars going by her underneath of her chin, and the light was constantly changing, and reflected light was changing. And this is what they call contre-jour or backlighting. And then this is north light. So I also decided to go back to my imagination and see what I could do using my classical realism. So I found these two, I think they're clock boxes, and I've been working on this painting right here called Woman Clothed with the Sun, and it's got inside and outside paintings, but I'm trying to combine my imagination with using classical realism, and it is a challenge, but I started these. And this one, Psalm 91, because of COVID. It's a protection prayer. And so I've just been working on this. Someone, one of my students from years ago, made that canvas that has that circle at the top. And I just stretched 3 other canvases and made it an 8-foot panel. And I'm still working on that. This is my studio with some of my students. I try to teach them what I've learned, and they love it. They love that I keep learning and keep enriching my life, because then they feel like they're getting the benefits. And I help them in all that they try to do. I teach children too. They joke with me and wish that I would teach them what I teach the children, but I tell them they don't listen to me enough, and we all laugh. And they've some of them have stayed many years, and they've given me very nice reviews. One of them said, after years of not feeling confident about my artistic ability, Debbie was the perfect teacher to get me fired up again. Not only did she have the knowledge and skills to help me remove my technical roadblocks, but she taught me how to look at my art in a way that keeps me excited and hopeful about what I can do next. So that's my intent, to try to help people learn what I didn't get in art school. And I was pleased that when I went to Studio Incamminati, I was so close to coming up with my own methods of teaching warm, cool, light, dark. It was very close to what they were teaching me about turning the light on. Thank you very much. I enjoyed showing you my work. This is my new studio look. I forgot, the COVID look. I have partitions of clear sheeting between the students, and everybody wears a mask, and I have a air purifier, and people are so glad they get to come to class and make art with me. This is my contact information. If you'd like to come see my studio, I hope you'll make an appointment if you're interested in seeing my studio or my art. Thank you very much for letting me share this with you.
Thanks very much, Debbie. That was really wonderful. And I also encourage people to make an appointment with Debbie. I have had the privilege of seeing her work in person, and of course, it's even more wonderful when you do so. And I love your still life as well as your portraits. And it's interesting how you sort of circle back with the imaginative work recently, particularly that first one. I just love that. So continue on that.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, really, really good. And you have an interesting both personal background, very diverse, and art as well. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you combine the influences from the two studios. I mean, has it affected your palette or your sequence of work?
Well, I still like to draw directly on the canvas for the most part, but I'm finding that I'm doing more thumbnail sketches first because it's just such, to put things together. It's one thing to be in front of something and just paint it, but now I'm trying to put different things together. And I'm going to be mentored by Lee Colley Wright with the National Portrait Society. And we've been talking, and so she's helping me to maybe do mock-ups. And so I'll be probably having to draw it out first, which I'll lose some of the spontaneity that I like with the straight line drawing, but I'm not sure. And then I just have a better awareness now from Studio Escalier about how do you combine different ideas and different light sources to make a whole painting. And they're such great art historians that they talk about how Vermeer has just done it so well, whereas other paintings fall short of it because he knew how to integrate the entire idea of light on one surface. So that's what my mind is trying to integrate, that and make the luminosity of Studio Incamminati.
Excellent. And I know you will achieve it. And she is an excellent painter as well. And so I'm sure she'll be a good instructor
Yes.
and mentor
Yes.
too. Do you use a lot of brushes, different types of brushes in your work? And is there a certain type that you favor, and also paints, a certain type of your oil paints?
Well, I love to find out from other artists what certain colors they like. So I have been expanding the 22 color palette with a few extras. So it doesn't really matter the name brand as long as it's a professional paint. So I really am kind of exploring different makes of the paints. The paint brushes are changing a little bit too because Studio Incamminati used 16 by 20 to 18 by 24. So we used a larger bristle brush usually. But I decided, like Nelson said, use the largest brush until you possibly can't. And one day, one of my friends said, I think it's time for you to learn how to use a smaller brush. So I am using a real range of brushes now, and I probably have 16 out at a time. And it's a big cleanup, but I am using
Wow.
soft hair and bristle brushes.
Okay, good. And there was a term that, I'm not an artist myself, so I wasn't aware of tunneling. I think you said a couple times the masters and contrasting it with Studio Incamminati. Did I understand that correctly?
Um, you mean being a tonal painter?
Yes.
Yes. Well, the old masters first wanted to get the grisaille, which is the tonal, done. So a lot of the old masters would paint a grisaille in gray or brownish colors to work out the value system. And then they might glaze on top of it or keep building. So the difference of Henry Henchy was he decided that it was time for color perception. And all that means is instead of looking at color first, its value is you're going to try to put color together with tone in mind at one time, at one moment.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Did that help?
Yes, yes. Very good. And you're also a very talented art teacher as well, and teaching adults and children. And so you have a different approach to that. Do you start them at different skill levels, or?
Well, I have a lot of repeats. So basically, the kids' classes, I come up with a year-long idea with 2 semesters, and it's based on having new people join as well as the people who have been with me. So I just assume that they can do it. I bring them all up to the same project, but they do it on their level. So it doesn't affect me. I like having the younger kids with the older kids because usually they're freer. But these days, everything is so digital that a lot of them are perfectionists at age 7. So age isn't a criteria. It's just getting them to think outside of their box and getting them to try new things. And then the adults, for the most part, have a lot of ideas they want to accomplish, and I let them do that. And then I will introduce a new concept to all of them at once. But for the most part, they get to work on the art that they want to work on individually.
Okay, very good. Sounds like an excellent approach. You've indicated a little bit what you're working on now. I'm wondering if you have any other goals or future plans for your artwork.
Well, that's what I am trying to work out with probably having to start using photographs and doing some sort of um, that's what I'm working out with my mentorship. I'm formulating that so much that I can't even articulate it. I just know that I'm going to be using probably some photographs, but trying to put together my ideas like you saw on those boxes into more of a classical realism outcome.
Okay, very good. Well, I know you will succeed. And again, they're great ideas, and I can't wait to see the finished product. And I encourage everybody to contact Devi to visit or become a student. Again, we thank you very, very much for joining us here. And we thank all of you in our audience as well. And we encourage you to join us again next month. The artist will be Mike Lane. He is a sumi-e painter, so Chinese brush painting, and very beautiful and elegant. And so join us again. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much.